Hello and welcome back to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts, Allison and Will and Samantha. Color coordinated today, accidentally.
All right.
Synchronistically. Just noticing that. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, today is my birthday.
It is.
I wish I had confetti. Like, I wish I could have just gone, confetti.
And, they say we have a full day today. We have a full day. I had to squeeze in a birthday breakfast brunch with our daughter who just went back to Virginia because our day is so full. But they say that you want to do fun things on your birthday, right? I cannot literally think of anything more fun than the things I'm going to do today, like tape podcasts, talk to you guys. Then we have our Sunday gathering tonight. Oh my gosh, fun stuff. And when Samantha showed up today, she had a beautiful orchid for me. So we added it to our props here on our stage.
Look how it's like just set
on our set.
So pretty.
And it looks really nice. Thank you, Samantha. So I just wanted to share about the orchid. For those of you who tune in every single week and you pay attention to our props that sometimes change or get shuffled around because we forget where they go.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, didn't mean to hit your chair.
No, you're fine.
we added a prop here to our set.
Yes.
Yep.
At any rate, today we're going to talk to you about truth. Whatever that means.
That's a deep subject.
Yeah.
And the reason,
what is truth?
Right? And how do we figure it out? But the reason is because the past few months, I noticed that the collective keeps talking about truth. They've talked about speaking our truth, living our truth, finding our truth. And this month, last week, for the November channeling was no different. They talked about remaining in our truth, finding our truth, that sort of thing.
Well, they dove deep into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as always, go back and check that one out, the collective.
That would be for November collective message. Yeah.
And it was their opening message again about truth. So we're thinking if they keep bringing this up about speaking, living, finding your truth, standing on your truth, then there's got to be something. There's a there, right?
Yeah. What's the meaning behind all
that? So we kind of want to explore that and riff off of that. So with that in mind,
where do we go?
Samantha was listening to that on the way up.
Yes.
And so you kind of wanted to start, expound on that. So tell us what was going through your mind as you were listening, freshly listening to that message.
Lots of different things. Because I think so many of us, it's weird because you got to take yourself back years and years ago, because it wasn't so polarizing an environment as it is nowadays.
Right.
And yet it still was, well, your truth was your truth. And, everyone else be damned. You were going to hold on to that truth and you were not going to give it up, for anything. But it's kind of okay. So I get that the nature of where we were in our heads back then and what truth was like. And to me, it's shifted so dramatically, because not only is the basis of truth, it's so much more intense. It's so much more, you have to believe it's not just, this is my truth. It's you have to believe my truth or you are so wrong. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I mean, it is I'm going to write you off. It's so intense now. So there's that aspect. And then there's also the aspect of, that those of us who are expanding our awareness of our conditions as humans, spiritual beings, and so forth, and the whole duality concept and all of that, I think, well, at least for me, and I think you guys will be able to agree on this, is that we're moving into this space of we can hold multiple truths as possible and probable, at the same time, and easily shift into respecting another person's truth without having to have it match our own. And that was the thing that was interesting that the collective was saying, because they said, it's holding those separate truths and then and being okay with it, and then finding the common ground, which we all know that you're supposed to in any negotiation, find the common ground.
Right.
But this is different, because this isn't I really don't like this and you really don't like this, but we're going to agree. It's, I respect where you're coming from. That's your perception. You respect mine. Now let's look at the common ground so that we can do something God, isn't that needed in our government right now?
It's pretty much needed everywhere.
It's
like
huge.
you said, the divisions,
Mm-hmm.
it's even more critical now because polarity is at such an extreme.
Yeah.
Everything that comes across the news or everything that comes into your purview is about taking sides, like everything, taking sides. And when you take a side, it means that I'm right and you're wrong, that I'm in this group, that we're the right group and you're wrong. And it isn't about that at all.
Yeah.
So when each individual stands in their divine truth, and this is an important piece of it, is your divine truth, then we all can find common ground because we're all coming from the divinity place. We're not talking about, oh, I'm a narcissist or I want to beat children or I want to do these bad things or be a criminal, and that's okay because it's my truth. That we're not talking about using that truth as justification for doing whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right.
And that can be somebody's truth in the moment because they've forgotten who they really are. Right.
Yeah. And I thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we can also from our divinity say that's their understanding in this moment because they don't get it. They don't understand who they are, but I'm not going to interact with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't mean that you have to make that a part of your life or say that it's okay.
Right. Right.
But coming from this place of divinity and knowing your truth in terms of who you are, knowing that you're loved, knowing that you're connected to source, that you're never away from source, you're never disconnected, and that we're all connected. Those are the truths we're talking about. And within that, we all have an individual truth based on our contract, based on our history and our past lives and the things that we want to accomplish in this life and that kind of thing. So talking about nitty-gritty differences like, oh gosh, I don't know, just little things that maybe spiritual people want to disagree on. I can't even think of a perfect example.
About just in the spiritual.
I'm just giving an example of things that you might disagree on because you have different contracts.
Well,
like for example, here's a good one. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go.
A lot of people think we're in the middle of a galactic war and that there are lots of galactic beings fighting for Earth. Correct. And then there are other people who think, no, that's really not the case. And what they want to portray in the origin story is that there is no fight over humanity, but some people can view it that way, or some people want to experience it that way because that's what they came in to experience. So in other words, one's not right and one's not wrong. We have different divine truths there based on our contract and what we want to experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, okay. I like that with the whole contract experience, or perspective of it. I'm thinking more like, and you can jump in anytime.
Yeah, I will. Don't worry. I'll strategically throw myself into this conversation somewhere.
But, you know, I'm thinking in terms of how we perceive our reality. Like, you know, like that feels like it's out here, but, you know, and how we're actually, okay, so I'm going to try to say this real carefully so I don't get us like, you know, checked or anything like that. So I had a really weird moment this morning where, you know, I thought I'd check the weather before I came up here, and I never look at videos, you know, but it's like, these were like weather videos and stuff. And there was one that caught my eye, something about the Antarctic or the Arctic ice melting thing.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, you know, here's another one about, you know, change in the world and stuff. See, I'm trying to be careful, put the words together or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And but what was interesting was the whole thing was about how it wasn't like we missed that window of opportunity. It's just like, yeah, no, it's happening. Like it's happening. There's studies have shown that there's no amount of stuff being put out there that could contribute or lessen it.
Right.
You know, so it was no like tipping point kind of thing. Right. It was simply, no, this is happening.
On off switch. It was there and now it's not, or there, it wasn't there. Now it is. Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there reading that and I'm like my mind, like there was no resistance. There was no, it just flowed. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, this is a new way to perceive the world. Like that I would see something on a weather channel kind of thing that would not be fighting against that notion that there was nobody pushing an agenda. It just simply was. Yeah.
Well, you would you would think that listening to the weather channel or that itself, just listening to the weather should be a very neutral piece of information.
One would think. Yeah.
But apparently it has an agenda, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but I know, I mean, it's, you know, for me, it's the longer I do what I'm doing, I don't, it's hard for me to thrust myself into the middle of this side or that side or this thing or that thing. And it, sounds all, wooey and, airy fairy stuff, but it's no, I'm at a peace. I'm at peace with really just everything that's going on. And it doesn't matter how weird the world is right now, how chaotic the world is right now, and all the BS that's going on around the world. Do I know it's there? Yes. Am I shielding myself from it? No. And not meaning I don't dive off into every, media platform to read every, headline. I see the headlines from multiple different things, and I'm just like, oh, it's like a check mark for the day. Oh, yep, still there. And then I go about my day. I don't consume myself with it. Now, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I'd be consumed with it because that's the world that I was in. Even go even further back, being in uniform, that was what I had to have in my purview. I had to take sides. I had to, I had to be on one side of it because that's what I did. And
you had to justify.
I had it. Well, yeah, part of it is justifying your actions, but now it's, it's really when you. Well, at least coming from my perspective, when you connect with so many higher level beings, energies, whatever you want to call it, or just even higher selves, that aspect of it, you really come to a realization there isn't a difference. It doesn't matter if it's a 12th dimensional being, a galactic, or a higher self. Energetically, it's all virtually the same. It's just the space that we inhabit, the human form that we inhabit is what is the, driving factor for how we want to interact in the world. Outside of the human body, for all intents and purposes, it's really just one. And I don't want to gloss over that, because some people are going to say, well, no, there's differences. Yes, there are differences, but
people are going to argue for their limitations.
Well, yeah, well, right. But it is when you connect and you've been connecting to them and you really get the sense of consciousness. I'll leave it at that. Consciousness is probably the best word. And I'm talking a grouping of consciousness or a collective of consciousness between higher level beings, humans, whatever you want to call it. It's everything. But it's all one place. And so when you can look at, what's going on around the world and you go, yeah, they're living out their contract. I can't deny them of that. No matter how heinous it might be, they're living out their contract. They're living their truth, right? So,
which is, again, not to blame the victim or say you signed up for this. It's okay that you're in the middle of this war because that was your contract. That's not
right. I'm not saying that I'm, that any of it is good or any of it's bad. I'm just saying, just from a very, you want to call it philosophical level, it is this aspect of everyone has their role to play. And, that unfortunately for some is their role. But it brings a bit of, I don't want to say peace to.
Well, peace is what we're striving for.
Yeah, but I'm saying for my existence or for what I do, it doesn't put me into an uncomfortable place or a comfortable place. It puts me in
neutral.
Right. It puts me into a place of being observant and being neutral of everything that's going on. Because, frankly, if I had to take sides, if I had to, and I'm speaking about, the atrocities that are taking place in the world right now. If I had to take sides and place myself on one side of the line or the other and say someone from that side, immersed in the whatever's going on, wanted a session, and then someone on the other side of that, immersed in it, wanted a session, it'd be very difficult for me to genuinely align myself to connect appropriately.
Right.
So but knowing that everyone is equal at the end of the day, meaning consciousness wise, then I can put myself into a place of neutrality of saying, you want a session? Have a session.
That's another really good point, that kind of dawned on me several years ago too, was that if I put myself out there in my humanness and I start picking sides and I'm for this presidential candidate or that one, or I'm for this idea or that idea, then all the people who aren't that are going to look at me in a different way, and they're not going to come to me for help. And what am I here for? I'm here to help people. I'm here to be a bridge maker, a peacemaker. I'm here to assist all of humanity, not one side or the other. And so to be in that neutral space is the best place to assist humanity, not to judge.
Pivot more easily too, like to assist and to
And but somebody, some of the audience members may say, well, if you're there and you're not taking one side or the other, then how do you make a decision? Well, it's not. Here's the thing is, I think too many of us, and I'm saying this as a general statement within a community of, whatever you call it, metaphysical workers, spiritual workers, light workers, the list goes on. There's a number of terms for it. Many of us love to wear our personal identity on the outside versus wearing it. I'm still human. I have to make personal decisions. I still have to, equalize everything that's in my world and say, okay, when it comes time to either vote or make a decision about some sort of policy or some sort of something, well, that's my decision. That's my personal decision. That's my personal truth.
And it changes according to where you are in life.
Exactly. I could have the decision today, but if I don't have to take any actions towards it until next year, well, it might change in that period of time because I'm not fully informed. I'm not fully aware. I don't know all things until the time comes. I have to make the decision. But there are so many of us that like to wear all of that on the outside. And so that's what I think.
Well, and again, that's about identifying ourselves and who are we? Right. Oh, well, I'm a mom, or I'm a biker, or I'm a this, or I'm a that.
I'm an activist. I'm this, I'm that. Right. So it's
part of labeling ourselves.
Yeah. But I mean, that goes to what you were saying is if you were to wear all of that information on the outside, and then, it
alienates.
It does. Mm-hmm. It does. And I have never won. I mean, even from the youngest of my, growing up, I always found myself as kind of being the mediator between people. It's finding the common ground. It's finding that place of commonality and neutrality in whatever's going on. So I don't know. It is a little difficult, but especially with what's going on today. But that's I still hold true to my own personal decisions, and I think everyone should. And in that, then you find your own truth. And in that, then you actually begin to see really kind of the neutrality in all things. That's my perception of it again.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is,
so in this truth seeking, the first thing that you have to do is to figure out what your truth is.
Right.
And that was part of what I wrote in The Journey Within is a lot of us don't know who we are or what we believe because our belief system is based on what everybody else thinks or what all of these labels are, or the way I label myself based on externalities.
Yeah.
And so finding your truth is the most important thing. And again, it goes back to finding your truth within that divine connection. Who are you within that divine connection? So going within to find that. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be, this is what the collective keeps saying. And they might have said it the month before last about that foundational ground is the only thing that's going to save us in the next few months. We have to have that to stand on because otherwise we're going to lose it when we start seeing bigger headlines and more chaos and all of this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to be torn. Like, okay, who do I vote for? Or who do I cheer on in these wars? Like I have to take a side. Like everything is forcing people to take a side. Like, am I the U or the R, or am I the I or the G or the P or the whatever I am? All of these different countries who are fighting. It's like they want you to take a side and stop. You don't have to. Mm-hmm. You go within, you find out who you are as a piece of divinity. And what does that mean to you? Does that mean you align with a particular country? Maybe not. Mm-hmm. So finding that truth and using that to steady you in the next few months is critical.
Mm.
Well, like my approach when I'm working with people or talking to family members, and they start ramping up. You know, my thing lately has been asking, well, I'm like, do you have family over? Like, say, let's just take the different locations. And I'm not just saying, you know, over in the Middle East, I'm saying all because there's a lot
of stuff going on
world that people are not acknowledging.
Right.
You know, so do you have a family member over there? Well, no. Okay. Are you this race or this race? Well, no, you know, and then it's like, okay, where's your dog in the fight? You know, it's like, I keep going back to that because I'm like, you know, it's one thing to sit there and play around. Like it's while this is occurring, it gives you the opportunity to play around with the idea of, I like this, I don't like that. And that is the idea behind contrast, you know, these conflicts and stuff. Yes, there's greater depth, human depth and meaning, but spiritually speaking, it goes back to the idea of contrast and being able to have a mirror and going, what do I prefer? What do I not prefer? You know, I like, because when you start to play around with it, when you allow yourself the space to play around with it, and like you blow it up so that it's not this, it's this. And then you start to go, well, these people are in pain. Well, so are these people. And then like, you know, you start breaking this all apart and, you know, all of a sudden you realize, okay, people are people. This is painful. And then your heart, you know, you give gratitude for where you are and you start sending love that way, you know, and sure, if you want to send money and, you know, whatever, but just, it's to recognize that like that's moving to that neutral space because you're recognizing the humanity and the individual souls involved in all of it. So like my husband and my son are diametrically opposed on a topic and my husband is determined to be correct. He is right. He watches the news. He's got the facts. And my son is watching all these other things.
Sure.
And so, and a lot of his generation they're coming from a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
And it's been very fascinating because it's like they're not taking everything into account. And so they're kind of being brash because if they took it all into account, they would kind of maybe tone it down a little bit. But it's been very interesting to listen to the two and their differences and their approaches and the substance of the information that's feeding into them. You know, so you've got the archetypal, you know, father, son,
yeah, sure.
You know, the need to be right. Whose truth is truer?
Right.
You know, and then you've got, well, who are your sources? And then, you know, like in the end, unless you are walking on that street, you don't have a clue. And even if you're walking on that street, you don't know if that's part of your contract, if that's part of wrong place, wrong time, which is I think it's a rare circumstance, but then again, who knows? I mean, life is messy. But I would say more that it's probably, well, no, because we divine a lot of things or devise, we plan. So, and again, not victimhood, but it's like, you can go, like, it's funny, you know, those old microscopes, from school where you'd go in and you'd go out, like you can keep going in and out on this topic and go, well, then let me look at, okay, now I got to back up. Now let me look at this because there's so much intricacy, which is the playground for us. I know that's weird to say that one, but it's literally, that's where, can you imagine if we didn't have the option to do that?
Well, that's why we come here. Yeah. Because it's fun to take on different identities and personas and experiences and challenge ourselves each time.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
But, you know, here's the thing. And I think this is, you know, I think some of what we're getting at too is, for myself, at least, when I'm, you know, I mean, obviously Allison knows me quite well. We've been together quite a long time. I would get fired up over certain things, right? You know, certain topics and certain things, because I felt like I had to defend it. I felt like I had to fight it. I felt like that's what I had to do. I had a dog in the fight, as you would say, right?
And why? Because the need to justify, or
just no other reason than I felt like I needed to. I don't know. Just because
when you make it part of your identity, this is the point. When it becomes who you are, like I am a fill in the blank. I'm a blank supporter.
Right.
Once that's your identity, then you defend it. You have to defend it because it is you and they're coming after you.
Right.
Correct?
So and I think that's, right. And so what I'm getting at is, some of our listeners may be, they may be struggling with, well, but that's that's the side I want to take. So I have to defend them. Well, yes, but, and to your point, Samantha, it is, pull yourself away from it just a little bit, allow yourself to observe it from a little different point, not granular, but a little more abstract. And then it isn't to say that you're going to depart from wanting to be part of whatever side you're on.
Exactly.
It just means that your perspective and your viewpoint may be a little bit broader and you'll have a different understanding. So you still can defend it, but you don't have to get, and I'm not saying this for any particular person or whatever, but in general, I feel that, and it comes from a place where what I understand now is before I would be adamant and I'd want to fight. I'd raise my voice and I'd want to defend it, and probably like your son and your husband, right? And it's, it gets embroiled. But now it's like, okay, I can defend it from a place where I don't have to. I can have a logical discussion. I can have a common discussion.
Well, that is the opposite of defending. So you don't have to.
Right. I can defend it, but I don't have to fight for it. I don't have to raise my voice and all that.
But it's not even a debate. Is not necessarily defending.
It's just, here's
my perspective. So you understand.
Yes, right, exactly. And I think that's what I'm getting at.
So much nicer.
Yes.
Like it feels so good because then people can sit there and try to poke holes in your perception. You're just like,
I don't have to prove anything, right? I don't have to defend anything.
It's interesting because what's coming to mind right now is, there's a small, and I'll say that there's a small group of us, in the metaphysical space that get it. And we find that neutrality, and we kind of find that common ground, and we don't need to scream and holler at each other. We can have the rational discussions. But there are, and I'll say outside of the metaphysical space or the spiritual space, they're looking at most everybody else is looking at their, I'll say, quote unquote, leaders, right? They're political leaders, they're governmental officials, they're whatever, blah, blah, blah. Somebody that
they've given away their power.
Right. Somebody that believes they have power, right? Over them. And, I'm going to use a phrase that I was given while I was in the service, and it has to do with leadership and aspects. And I think it applies very well to kind of our, world today. The speed of the leader sets the speed of the group, right? So right now, look at all of our leaders. It doesn't matter worldwide. What are they doing? They're screaming at each other. So if they're
bombing each other,
or they're bombing, whatever, if they're looking at it, that's right now, that's their truth. Okay. We'll put it in that category. That's their truth. So they're going to be on each side and they're screaming at each other. So those that don't have that place of neutrality, they see that, they observe that. Now that becomes what they feel they need to do because our leaders are doing exactly what.
So now we're going to fight on the ground over those two things, with each other.
Yeah.
Here's a fun experiment, because I notice myself who stays out of the whole political thing, whatever. But I've noticed me doing this, that I'll sit there and think, wow, this person seems interesting. I don't really know much about them. I'm not digging into it or anything, but I'll go, I just might have heard a sound clip and I thought, wow, that person sounds interesting. And then I go through my day, then I have an encounter and somebody, I say, did you see that clip, by the way? I was just wondering what your thought. And they would say, oh, that person, he's flat out crazy.
Right.
He's flat out crazy. What are you thinking? And I have noticed like a door shut in me, like not like a door shut, like, well, I'm going to have my own counsel, a door shut, like, oh, well, maybe that person, maybe there's something I don't know.
Right.
So instead of going into my intuitiveness, I just, like we're so lazy about it sometimes. And so people who aren't even aware, they're not even feeling, because I feel it.
Yeah.
And then I'm going, whoa, that was interesting. And then I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to entertain this, right now, or I will entertain this right now, whatever. But I recognize what's happening.
Yeah.
So you take people who are not paying attention, like they just let all this stuff come in, and someone just goes like, you have a truth. Well, I think this person's really good. And just watch how somebody else comes in and they will say something, try to pay attention to it and notice how you physically and
Yeah.
mentally react to it, and just make it a game. Because literally a lot of people, yes, they're along party lines and
Oh,
stuff,
yeah,
and
sure.
that makes it really easy not to think, right?
Mhm.
But if you really go by your own personal set of values, your own perception,
Yeah.
you're going to shift parties and people within the party a lot, because no one person,
if you go by your own personal truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
And use your discernment on doing it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you're going to find that if you play this game, that people are going to come along and it'll dink you a lot.
Mhm.
Like you'll just go, oh, wow.
But it helps you to reevaluate, to continually reevaluate. Where do you stand? What is your truth? Right.
You're
Yes.
paying attention to that,
Right.
to someone else's, like, are you just going to blindly adopt someone else's truth?
Right.
Like, I mean, because think how crazy that was.
But we do it all the time.
I did.
We habitually do that all the time.
did.
With products and
I
Yes.
did it for 30 years in the military. So, I mean, that's in essence the military brand is to follow somebody else's truth, right? You have to obey the orders. You have to obey
you have to drink the Kool-Aid.
Right. You gotta immerse yourself in it. And so it is hard to unravel yourself. It is hard to pull yourself out of that thinking. And that's, even though it was my underpinning, it took, the 2020 and beyond,
era
for me to emerge from that. I mean,
that's a pretty big,
yeah.
That, like, you had military, you had religion,
Yeah.
that you
And
guys had
military,
to,
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
and a dose of military. Why
Yeah,
not?
a little bit.
A little sprinkling of military. Yeah. But
Very interesting.
So this is what the collective means by living your truth.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So we talked about the foundation,
It's
finding your truth,
Mhm.
and then it's walking it, living it,
Yep.
being it, embodying it. And it isn't a one and done. It's not like, oh, I've
No.
discovered, here's what I believe.
yeah,
Your
it's not, you
feelings,
checked it off and
and now you go, but you're going to go through your day. And like Samantha says, somebody might say something that goes against what you thought was your truth, and you respect them. And you're kind of like, oh, well, maybe I'm not right. Maybe there is. Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe they do have something that I'm not aware of. Well, then you reevaluate, you go back within. How does this make me feel? Do I feel expansive when I hear
Mhm.
this? Do I get butterflies in my stomach in a good way because this feels good and loving? Or do I get that tightness in my chest, or that uncomfortableness in my gut?
Mhm.
What are you feeling when you contemplate what they're saying, rather than just taking it at face value? That's living your truth.
Now, here's a question, and I'll play the audience member, right? What about, do I have to, if somebody has a bit of information that I feel is the truth, and I want to, go on that route, but then they start, wavering from that, but and saying something else, but then coming back to, that same time, and back and forth, they have some truth, but not all truth. And somebody else,
you take some and you
is it okay to, float back and forth between?
Of course it is, but
You take what resonates.
the bigger picture is not to be worrying.
That's more of a, yeah.
Not to worry what they are saying,
Right.
because you're everything you're filtering through your own divine essence and guidance. You really stop focusing at some point on the external. You stop worrying about what anybody says and listening to others outside of you. But if something does pique your interest, then you go within and see how that resonates with you. But I think eventually we get to the point where we don't need all of that external validation.
Okay, so I think it's diabolical because, the forces that be, I mean, if you look at this, there's people who are part of the slow living movement, right? And
What is slow living movement?
Have you not heard that?
I don't think I've heard that
It's
term.
a thing.
That's a thing.
And it's not, they might not even be spiritual oriented people, like, oh my God, I've got it. But they're just slowing it down. They're learning that they're more productive by slowing it down.
Yeah.
By disengaging from all of the
A very
silly crap we do.
Basically living a simplistic
yeah.
life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so,
Minimalist.
and that's not to say that, they're on the right path, or that's just their truth.
Sure.
But here's the thing, like the powers that be, whatever, they've got us running so hard and so fast. Most, most of the people I know work 2 jobs, or 3 or 4, and just struggling and everything. And there's not the time to have very many original thoughts.
Right.
You don't have time for, and you're worn out to have that self-examination.
Yes.
And I think it's intentional
I was just
Fight
gonna,
It is intentional.
Yeah, I was gonna say diabolical.
are they intentionally putting too much on your plate to distract you from what you're actually supposed to be
Think about it.
fighting?
Yeah, thus the slow living movement.
Right.
Which is, it is a huge, like, got to dive into that some point, because it's a huge thing. And there literally is more space to get things done and be more productive.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's an
oh,
old adage for sure.
The team always talks about slowing down to speed up.
Yeah.
So when you wake up
Sure.
and you know you have a busy day, stop and do your meditative stuff or your practice or your yoga or whatever, because then you will find the time in the day.
Yeah.
But think about this. We're doing this to ourselves. We are engaged. Yeah. I mean, yes, one could look outside and say they're doing it to us.
Government doing it to us, Allison.
And it is to some degree. It depends on your perspective.
Yeah.
But this is part of being in a polarized world where we have these people doing these things, but we have to live within all of that in the way that we need to. So in other words, if we want to dive into all of this stuff and be distracted, then we will, and we can. But the point is to be able to recognize our truth and ourself in light of that. In other words, if this is happening, what does that mean about me?
Right.
How can I be myself within that? How can I demonstrate my love and compassion within that? How can I be who I am in this reality? And yeah, the collective talks about this often, about eliminating these distractions and going within and a matter of fact, I think it was really early on in our journey, and I don't remember, it was either we channeled this from a galactic or whatever. And I said, what do you notice about Earthlings? What's kind of funny or sad or whatever?
Pathetic.
Right.
And the sad thing is that as humans, we don't have time to understand ourselves as a spiritual being because we are so busy. We're running our kids to soccer.
So distracted.
We're doing this and that. We're PTA meetings. We're doing all of these things, working 2 jobs. And we don't have time to go within. We don't have time. We don't make time, really is the correct word, to go within and to discover and to reconnect with source.
See, I think it's a construct.
Yeah.
Like that's a construct that was created, like, and it's gotten even more challenging with everything speeding up.
Yeah.
To sit there and go, like, before, think about it, when you were kids. I remember when I was a kid, we had a long hallway before we got to my parents' bedroom. And then you go in the bedroom and there was the bed, big bed. And on a Saturday morning, if they weren't doing something with me or that hadn't been kicked out of the house already, I would go running down the hall, fly onto the bed, face down on top of their newspapers. And I'd just start going, I'm bored. I'm bored. And I was so freaking bored. And
if we could only be that bored, right? Again,
when did, and the thing, our children aren't that bored. They're not given the time to be bored. They're not given the time to be imaginative, to be creative, so this whole thing is a construct that has, like you look from the 70s into the 80s, and then it just took off. Where, like, never in humanity, I don't think, unless there's other civilizations way back, have had their time so preoccupied with, TikTok and soccer games. Yeah. Like I used to say with my kids, I'm like, people would say, well, they got to be in at least 2 sports and take one kind of music, one instrument,
or they won't get into the college of their choice.
Yeah, and you know what? I was like, nope. If they have an interest, and I'd have people argue and say, well, then you're not opening up their minds to other things. And I'm like, okay, there's an argument to that.
Sure.
However, I want them to have a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Because they're going hard at it every other. So anyway, all of this is a construct that it challenges us to prioritize. And I think that as we go through this awakening, by hell or high water, like I know for me, I have to have the downtime. I have to have that time to reflect. And so I think that it becomes this choice that it's like needing oxygen.
Yeah.
And before we depart from this topic, I do want to mention the speaking your truth aspect of it, because once we've figured out the foundation of our truth and we're living our truth, the collective urges us now to stand up and start speaking our truth. And that does not mean that you're in somebody's face. This is my truth, so it has to be yours.
Not proselytizing.
it's a paradox to understand, but it really is accurate to say that, when you have 5 people at the scene of a crime and they're witnesses, they all saw something different.
Yes.
They'll describe something different. So there are 5 different things happening at the same time in the same circumstance. So we all have, and it's really mind blowing to hold this in yourself, that you have your own perspective, you do, and I do, and none are right or wrong. They're all different perspectives based on your experience, based on your past history, your past lives, whatever. Right. And so that's one aspect of it, is understanding that everybody has a different truth, but speaking your truth in terms of, we need to be that divine essence out in the world right now. We have got to not be afraid to have these kinds of conversations when it's appropriate. And when, if somebody asks you, whatever, what do you believe? Or what do you think about this situation that's happening? Or if you saw spirit or you talk to spirit and it comes up in conversation, tell somebody about it, because you don't know how many times they're going to go, oh my God, I do too. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
So it's critical to speak your truth, whatever that is. And don't worry about the reaction or the outcome. Let the universe take care of the outcome for you.
But also,
sorry.
I was going to say, but also to what you were saying, it isn't to get up in somebody's face and,
no,
scream and holler. And a number of, very prominent leaders and stuff have said that, the loudest voice is the one that isn't spoken. You know what I mean? It's like, it's, the truth that is there, and that,
the elephant in the room.
Yeah. You know that you can speak it, but just through even your presence and your silence speaks more volumes of information and more volumes of truly who you are than having to, speak it. And then when it comes to that point where you've given the opportunity to speak it, it'll come out so eloquently because you're in alignment with everything that's taking place at that moment.
Alignment is critical.
I love that. So I was going to there's an out here, because when you are, you feel so compelled to speak, it's not necessarily that everybody's going to be receptive of what you say.
Absolutely.
So just remember, we brought this up before, if somebody wants to get in your face and argue your truth,
sure.
Just, you get to a point, just say, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
And allow them to, because people who are so invested in their truth, it's like they're literally looking for people to argue against.
Yeah. Right.
And so, but by you opening up and speaking on some level, hopefully, like, I don't think they'd be in your presence if they weren't meant to get some critical bit of information or vibration or whatever it is. And so, like, the tendency, even for the most practiced person of this, is to still turn around and want to go, no, you're not hearing me. You're not hearing that I'm not telling you, you just literally have to step back and go, you're not wrong. Or like, I do say this at times, and my kids don't like it. I'll say, keep arguing for your limitations. It's okay.
Or just saying something silly like, that's or not even silly, but respectful.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
It's a good point of view. Yeah.
I get your perspective, or
I hear your perspective.
Right.
Or, and it's, and the thing is, when you're in this space and your own truth, it actually, it's when you stop and realize, I'm about to argue, it's actually very easy to shift into that. Remember, we started off with the whole neutral space, and I love neutral, man. It is not that I want to live there. It's just that lovely place to go back to when, like, there's too much, just that yin yang.
It's taken me a while to get there, and I still have a few steps to go.
It is very liberating not to have to defend yourself and not to have to convince anybody. When you just keep reminding yourself, it's really telling for me, because I'm certainly not there yet. But when I start to find myself getting upset in a defensive posture, I have to literally stop and back up a little bit. But it's very telling. When you feel that defense, then there's something there that can be cleared. There's something there that can be worked on, and stop and start questioning yourself. What am I defending and why? And to know, then what we talk to people about this, and there are certain members of our family that don't necessarily believe it or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, we don't have to convince you. You have every right to believe however you want to. That's your experience here on earth right now.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you tell Natalie about, or Evan about something that came through on a channeling that was very profound for you, and you express it to them, and they're like, oh, okay.
You so badly want your kids to receive it, and you're just like, someday they'll get it.
Yeah, right.
Someday.
Right. Maybe in their head they're going, oh, mom's just wacko,
But they don't have to get it.
They don't have to, no. But
it's just interesting.
You want to express what you learned, and that's, and that's good. And it's a little seed that gets tucked away, and maybe at some point, it grows into something that they begin to ask some questions about what was said. So, you
guys brought up something that's critical, and I want to make sure that we share this again, and that is alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
When you're in alignment and your connection to source is full on, and so that you're allowing source to kind of move through you and be in the world, it's easy to speak your truth.
Yeah.
It's easy. Like Will said, the words will flow. And even if you don't think that they came out right, they're going to be heard correctly.
Yes.
They'll be heard correctly. Because I admit, I often open my mouth and insert my foot. I do say sometimes the wrong thing at the wrong time. I never have ill intentions, but I just sometimes say things off the cuff that I think may be funny, and they're not really funny.
But they cause the other person to have to think. It triggers them. It does something. So.
Right. And hopefully they will be authentic enough to come and say, hey, I didn't really, that rubbed me the kind of wrong way. And I can say, we can talk about it, right?
Well, that is probably, you bring up a good point with that. And it's something that many of us don't engage with because we don't, and I'll put it in the category of, conflict or having a disagreement with somebody, but, having that, and I hate to say it this way, but I'm going to say it anyway, but this adult way of handling things, of being able to say, hey, what you just said, I don't necessarily agree with it. It kind of rubbed me wrong. Can we talk about this? Maybe I'm missing something, but many of us, and I'll put myself in a category, will shut it off and just go,
We assume,
and just walk away.
Ill intent,
right? And instead of, but what I've found over time, and even in the military, I would do this, and when somebody would speak like that, and I didn't agree with it or whatever, and typically you don't confront those that are bringing forth information in the military, because it's,
especially not if they're higher rank than you are.
Upon. But when you achieve a certain rank, you have a little bit more leeway on that, and that's where I would do it more. But when you can get to the point of being able to, I don't want to say confront, because that has a wrong connotation, but openly discuss, something that somebody said that you didn't necessarily agree with. Well, there's two actions that take place. One, you learn something because you may not have heard what they're saying, and they too they're able to dig deeper into what they thought they were bringing across.
Yeah.
And they actually learn more by what they were trying to say, and they may actually shift their position on what they were trying to bring across. I've had that happen a couple of times, and and you come away with much.
It's a win-win,
right? You come away with much greater respect for that individual,
each other, both.
Right.
I feel like we can launch into a whole other conversation with this one. Yeah. But it's all like, all of this stuff is really, being in alignment, walking your talk, truth, integrity, discernment, resonate,
all of it.
The
whole ball.
Yeah. It's just like, we tend to pick out one thing to begin to discuss, but it all comes back to the whole overarching, concept. Just get with the program, open up.
Yes. All of you get with the program.
Right. Get on the wagon, man. Come on.
Such a nicer world.
But it's, and that's the thing is, like, we're, everybody, and I will say that I think a lot of us, we struggle. It's like, there's so much to do as this, working in the spiritual community, and we have to be this, and we have to be that. And we have to be all these things that I wasn't once was, and all. Yeah. No, you just have to be yourself. You just got to be that self, what you feel inside, and the love that you feel inside for yourself. That's who you need to be on the outside.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you may not have the most eloquent words, but what comes across
is heart-centered.
It's heart-centered and it's your truth. And it's hard to argue with that when the person that's receiving it genuinely feels that it's coming from your heart. It's hard to argue with that.
For sure. That's a good way to end this episode. That's fantastic. Go within to the heart whenever you're trying to figure out your truth, whenever you're trying to live your truth, or you're trying to speak your truth. Go into the heart. And if it feels expansive in your heart, then it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No matter what happens. Seriously.
So,
keep on living in your heart space.
And your truth.
And you'll find your truth automatically.
That's right.
Yes.
But thank you all for joining us on this episode of Out on a Limb podcast. And until next time,
see you guys.
See ya.